All right, let's understand exactly how methods work with Java. So right here, you can see that this is the main method. So public static void main, and then string args. So let's go one by one and understand exactly what, this, and this means, right? So right here, you've learned about the access modifiers, right? So this is either public or package protected, and also there is a protected one, which is for when you are subclassing, which you will learn later, right? So this is the actual access modifier. And then you have static. So static means that this method belongs to a class. And I'm going to touch upon static in a second. But for now, just know that static means that it belongs to a class and not an instance, right? I'm going to explain this in detail later. Next, you have the actual return type. In this case is void. So void means it doesn't return anything. And I'm going to give you an example in a second. And then you have the actual name of the method. So here main, and then inside we have some arguments. So arguments are data which are passed into the actual method that we can work with. So let me give you an example. So here you saw that we had this method. So right here, let me simply say private, and then static, and then increment, and then number, right? So here, if I say int, so we are taking a value here. So int value, and inside here, so we're going to do a few things. So one, this method is actually missing the actual return type, right? So if your method will have a return value, i.e. if you say return and then anything. So in our case, let's say value and then plus and then 1. So here we have to specify the return type. So in our case, we are returning an integer. So here will be int, and this should be increment, right? So if you are returning a string, right? So if you are returning a sequence of characters, so then you have to change the data type to match what you are returning, right? So in our case, we are simply returning an int, right? So this can also be an object, right? So here you could say, a point or a local date, right? So if you want a function that gives you the current date, but I'm going to give you examples of all in a second. So here I'm saying int, and then the name of the actual method, increment number, and this is camel case. Again, I've explained this in the previous course, how you should name your methods and variables and classes. And then here we have some parameters. So this is what data that this method receives, right? So it receives the actual value and then adds 1. So here, if I say increment number and then pass 0, so this guy returns an integer, right? Int, and then x equals 2, and then increment number. However, if this method right here does not return anything, then we cannot assign a value. So right here, so let's simply have a method. So private, and then static, and then print. And then here, what we're going to do is simply take a value. So int, and then a value. And what we're going to do is simply log the actual value, right? So we are simply redefining the system.out.println to a shorter name, so value here, right? So here we're not returning anything, so this function does not return anything. So in that case, this will be void, and the way we use it is, so here I can simply say print and then x. So if I was to, for example, say int and then equals to print x, or actually y equals to print x, this does not work because this function right here, so this method, does not return anything. Therefore, you cannot assign anything to it. There we go. So if your function does not accept any values, right, or any parameters, and again, for parameters, if you want more than one, you can have as many as you want. So, you know, you can have integer and then y and then string. So basically, you can have as many as you want inside here, right? And you can use whatever data type that you want. So if your method does not accept anything, right, does not accept any value, so let's say that I want a method here, so private, and then here this will return local, and then static, and then local date, and then get current date. So here we're not receiving anything. I just want this to return local date dot and then now, and then end that with semicolon. So now here I can say get current date, and inside is not receiving anything. So if I pass, for example, 1, you see that it doesn't work. If I pass a string, it does not work. However, if I was to pass, for example, a string here, string x, you can see that this now works. So here I can say get current date, and this gives me the current date. So this will be var and then now. And let's change this to var as well. And this is pretty much everything that you need to know about methods. So you've got the access modifier, static. This is optional, right? As you'll see later in this course. So this is optional. And then you have int. So this is the return type. If you're not returning anything, simply say void and then the name of the method, and then whether your method receives any number of arguments, right? So arguments are simply data that your method works with. So for example, here, if I say, for example, let's create a method here. So let me simply say get yesterday and then yesterday's date, and then remove get current date, right? So now here I can say dot and then minus, and then here let's simply say int and then value or v, right? So minus and then days. So here I can say v, and this should be get and then date minus and then days, right? So you see that now this receives a value. We pass a value that this works, which means that now I can say get current days minus and then 10, or if I duplicate this, I could simply say 100, right? And both of these, they do return a date, right? So here I can say, for example, HH, and I'm just brushing this. So var and then XX, right? So make sure you have a better name for these variables, because these are not, you know, proper names, right? But I'm just showing you exactly how methods work. And this is everything about methods. If you have any questions, go ahead and let me know. But you're going to see methods and use methods throughout this course, and you'll be very comfortable with. This is all for now. Catch me in the next one.